Georgia keeps its playoff hopes alive with a win over Tennessee. Oregon escapes an upset at Camp Randall, and BYU loses its perfect season in a stunning upset to Kansas. All this and more from Week 12 of college football. This is the Nitro College Football Show. And welcome to the show. I'm Burl.
And I'm Streit.
And we've got a lot to talk about today from Week 12 of college football. We'll also cover the updated college football playoff rankings and look ahead to Week 13. But before we dive in, we just wanted to say a quick thanks to all the new viewers who watched and subscribed last week. If you're new here, please like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right. Georgia absolutely looked great against Tennessee this weekend, winning 31-17. Redemption story for Carson Beck. It was awesome to see. I was so happy for him. He really needed this, the game that he had. And so did the offensive line. I was railing on the offensive line last week, and they stepped up big in this game. And it was a weird start to the game because, we had 3 straight punts. We couldn't move the ball. And we were just like, oh my gosh, it's Ole Miss all over again. Here we go again. And then all of a sudden, Georgia rattles off 31 points against a team that hasn't given up more than 19.
They sure
did. And it was beautiful.
Yeah, Georgia became the first team not only to score 20, but 30 on Tennessee this season. And as you mentioned, it truly was a redemption game for Carson Beck. No turnovers, 25 of 40 for about 343, 2 touchdowns. Also had a couple of nice runs, including a touchdown run late in the game. And for the offensive line, this was really a story about cohesion. For the first time all season, Georgia did not substitute freely. Actually, they didn't substitute at all on the offensive line. Ernest Green was out. Monroe Freeling filled in nicely at left tackle. And Tate Ratledge certainly looked the most comfortable he's looked since coming back. Jared Wilson had a great game. And overall, just a really, really good game from the offensive line, particularly in pass blocking. Run blocking was okay. Georgia running game was just okay, but pass blocking was phenomenal. They gave up 0 sacks. It was a clean game for Carson, and one that I think both Carson and the team needed to kind of get their confidence back as we make a push toward the playoff.
Yeah, it was a beautiful thing to see. We saw some new players step up as well on the offense. We saw Dylan Bell leave the game with an injury. I think it's an ankle or a sprain. Yeah, ankle sprain. So hopefully we get him back sometime this year.
They said it's an ankle sprain, but it won't require surgery, so it's not a tightrope situation. They said a couple weeks. I would suspect that he doesn't play. Definitely, obviously not this week. They said he might play at Tech, but I doubt it. I think they'll keep him on ice until the playoff, as long as Georgia makes it.
Yeah. Is he a senior?
No, he's a junior. He's a true junior.
He's a junior? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So, yeah, well, he might sit out that game. If he was a senior, I'd say he was going to be there. But with him stepping out, we got to see Nitro Tuggle come in. Nitro Tuggle's probably going to be the show's favorite receiver of all time moving forward.
I know. Somebody told me we ought to get him as our official team sponsor.
Absolutely. I don't know if we have enough NIL for him though.
No. Maybe if we pay him on Cameo, we'll do an intro for the show.
Yes, please. That would be awesome. But he looked good. He had a couple of good catches, and he definitely had a presence on the field, which was awesome to see. I think that really helped the offense.
Yeah, he looked the part. He looked good. He looked fluid. I think there was 4 targets to him. He ended up, catching 2 of them. There was one deep ball that I think he just picked up late. It was a well-thrown ball that if he'd picked it up a little bit earlier, he could have got it. But, probably his biggest play was the catch that he had. Georgia was backed up because of a penalty. It was like a 2nd and 25, I think. We completed a pass for about 13, 14 yards, but Tennessee got called for a face mask, which resulted in a first down, and that was the drive that Georgia ended up taking the lead on a touchdown. So it was a huge game for him. In addition, we finally saw some life out of the cornerback position. Daniel Harris came into the game, and he looked great. Early in the game, Tennessee took a shot at Julio Humphrey, and he was out of position. And once again, he got called for pass interference. It was one of the most blatant pass interferences I've ever seen. And unfortunately, that's become a common occurrence with him. Harris came in the game, and he shut that side of the field down. I think they had one reception to his side of the field the rest of the game. So we've seen a little bit more from Harris. Earlier in the year, he wasn't even playing. He had that big hit in the Florida game. And I think he might have jumped up and snatched that starting job away from Humphrey for the rest of the year.
I do too. I absolutely do. And Humphreys, we've talked about this before. Humphreys kind of been on my naughty list since the Bama game where he gave up that final touchdown and blocked his own guy to prevent
Right.
from making the tackle. That just really burnt me up. But when pass interference got called on him, and I saw him get yanked right away, I said, "Oh, that's probably going to be it for him." And then we saw Daniel Harris the rest of the night.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Humphrey played the rest of the game.
He
I didn't
didn't.
see him in on another snap.
He played a total of 6 snaps, and
Wow.
Harris played like 66, 67. So
Okay. Well, I think that's pretty definitive there.
yeah,
He almost transferred in the offseason last year. Actually, Daniel Harris almost transferred in the offseason too. Both of them, I think, initially went in the portal and pulled back, but it wouldn't surprise me if he's back in the portal again.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, kind of ironic, because if you remember last year, everybody was just railing on Dalen Everett and wanting him to be benched in favor of Humphrey, because whenever Humphrey came in, he did pretty well, but he stayed hurt. And I am really, really happy for Everett because he's doing that whole Kamari Lassiter progression.
Right. He's taken the mantle of that, that number one Georgia corner. We had Eric Stokes. We had Eric Stokes. We had Darian Kendrick. We had Keely Ringo, and then we had Lassiter. And even back before that, we had DeAndre Baker, and so we've had that good long line of number ones. So
yeah, it's just cool to see that that corner who goes from being the guy that each team is throwing on because the other guy shut down corner, and now he's that guy.
Right. In addition, this game, we finally saw the breakout game from the Georgia tight end position. Oscar Delp, hello.
Touchdown machine.
Coming into the season, we thought, Oscar Delp's going to be a star. He's going to step in for Brock Bowers. He will be a good target for Beck. But up until this game, he had not scored a touchdown all year and was kind of passed by Lawson Lucky on the depth chart. But he showed back up this game. He had two touchdown catches. He had 4 catches overall. Lawson Lucky had a long pass, and we are starting to see the emergence of Ben Urosic, the transfer from Stanford. Early in the season, he looked like he was not up to speed for the SEC. That Pac-12 looked totally different. He couldn't block. He wasn't catching well. But this game, I really started to notice him out there on the field. He had 3 catches. He looked great in blocking. A big catch to set up the final touchdown of the game. So really proud that we've got him going in the tight end position as a whole. I think they had 10 catches as a group. So it's good to see. We can't replace Bowers, but we can replace him in the act.
Yep, exactly. You can replace him with production from multiple people. So one thing I really noticed on both sides of the ball was after Harris comes in and he's firmly cemented on the defense, and then unfortunately when Dylan Bell, while Dylan Bell was still in there, you could see that Georgia was starting to settle in on who's going to be their go-to folks on offense. It was like they just said, all right, this is who we're rolling with. These people give us the best chance to win, and we're burning the boats and moving forward with it. And that was really awesome to see because it was like the first time all year we saw a cohesive unit on both sides of the ball for 3.5 quarters.
Yeah. And the game started out, as you mentioned before, the game started out kind of shaky. The first couple drives were bad. Georgia got down 7-0 and they had to punt again. Might have been the play of the game. Brett Thorson stepping up and making that tackle on the long punt return by Tennessee. I mean, it easily could have been a 14-0 game. If Thorson doesn't make that tackle, he makes that tackle, Georgia holds them to a field goal, and then the offense gets going.
Yeah, I think Thorson is just, when it comes to Tennessee, he's going to make plays. He makes the tackle this week. 2 years ago, he has that brilliant punt that goes from our goal line all the way down to their goal line.
Yeah,
And
arguably
that
one of
was
the best punts I've ever seen.
absolutely, it might be the best punt I've ever seen. Like, no lie.
71 yards.
Ridiculous.
And it basically almost hit the pylon.
Yeah. It was great. So something about when he plays Tennessee, he's going to make a play.
Yep. So, after Thorson made that play, Georgia held him to a field goal. Once they got the ball back, they were finally able to get the offense going. And I think it really turned around on that play when Carson Beck broke off that run. It was about a 10-yard run. And he laid his shoulder into the guy, and he got up, and all of a sudden it was like that woke Carson Beck up. Like suddenly he was not the Carson Beck we'd seen early in the game or the last few weeks. He was back to last year Carson Beck, firing darts and hitting people. And I don't know about that hit, what it was, but that brought him back. And from then on, he looked in control the rest of the game.
It was great to see him come back to form again, and that's really what we saw. And I think what helped with that is his threat of being able to run the ball.
Right.
The Georgia offense still can't run the ball effectively. But when you have a quarterback that gives you a little bit of escapability, we saw this a lot with Stetson. Like he's by no means a running quarterback, but he could scramble. And right. Beck is proving that, he's got some of those chops. Maybe not as fast as Stetson, but he's got some moves. And that one scramble he had when he was dead to rights in the backfield, he broke some tackles and made a play.
The underappreciated part about the offense in this game was the ability to control the ball completely and not be rushed, not have to worry about, if they didn't complete a pass or they got stopped in the run game. They just stayed the course. And they absolutely controlled the ball in the second half of the game. They only had 3 real possessions plus the end of the game. They scored 2 long touchdowns, and they got yards on the other one. And I think that was a key, to shutting down Tennessee. Even though they haven't been as much of a crazy offense like they have in years past at Tennessee, they're still predicated on going fast and scoring quick. The Georgia defense was able to keep them in check. I said to you a couple of times during the game that Georgia's got to stop giving up 4 or 5 yards on first down, because Tennessee, much like Georgia, was also converting third downs like crazy in the game. Georgia held them scoreless, but Tennessee certainly moved the ball in the second half, but it was all controlled. It was, second, third down conversions. There were no big plays, and then they bowed up when they needed to, and they got the ball back. Just an absolutely brilliant second half defense from the Georgia side. I think there was a total of 5 sacks in the game, which is great. I didn't see any effects of Nico and the injury, concussion, or anything. He looked fine. He made good decisions. He didn't throw into coverage. He ran when he needed to. He played a good game. His numbers may not have been great, but other than the last play of the game, which was just desperation, and he fumbled, he didn't make any mistakes. Dylan Sampson for Tennessee looked the part. I still think he is
Beast.
The best running back in the SEC. The touchdown run near the end of the first half was a great cut. He saw a little hole and he went for it. But after that, Georgia shut him down pretty good. But yeah, it was an overall impressive offensive and decent defensive effort from Georgia. By far the most complete game they played all season. And it was just fun. It was a good night at Sanford Stadium. It wasn't tense. Everybody seemed loose. The team seemed loose, and it was a great night.
It was an electric atmosphere. I know that's been thrown around a lot in the past few days, but that was one of the most enjoyable game experiences at Sanford Stadium I think I've ever had. It was, the crowd was really into everything, even though the defense was kind of making it hard for us to keep, the energy up for a little bit because we kept giving up so many third downs. But overall, the fourth quarter whole thing, that was awesome.
You know what the best part of that fourth quarter was? 12 plays, 92 yards, 6.5 minutes off the clock. That ends with the game icing touchdown. That was an
Beautiful.
absolutely brilliant drive by the Georgia offense to close out a game. We haven't seen a Georgia team close out a game like that in a long time. They used to call that the Kirby Death March. Running the ball, but that wasn't a running only drive. There was passes, conversions on third down. Overall, that was just an amazing drive and awesome to see Georgia finally, buck up and do something at the end of the game.
Incredible drive, way to close it out with authority and put the icing on the game and get that victory formation, especially with the defense, at the end, getting that turnover on fourth down. It was just kind of like the exclamation point there, icing on the cake.
Georgia's obviously still pretty banged up. We still got injuries all across the board. Luckily, we've got UMass this week. Hopefully, it's a game where we get a lot of backups in. I'd love to see 2 or 3 of the backup quarterbacks get some play in this game because Carson's finally got it figured out. We certainly don't want him getting hurt. And it should be, a good game to also get some work for Bowens and Phillips back there. Nate Frazier, who I thought watching the game, I thought he'd made some bad decisions, chopped his feet a little bit too much. But when I watched the replay, I thought he actually played pretty well to get what he got. The Tennessee linebackers are really good, and he had some holes sometimes, and they closed fast. So it was a good game for Frazier, but I'd love to see Bowens and Phillips get some more work next week.
Really, all three of them need it. I mean, nothing substitutes for experience and reps. So, yeah, hopefully we get to see them and a lot of the backups. One team that wasn't able to put their backups in was Oregon against Wisconsin. Nail biter at Camp Randall. Those fans were going nuts and crazy, jumping around, doing the whole thing.
It was funny though because I don't know if you saw the video, but the Oregon sideline, Camp Randall, they do jump around at the start of the fourth quarter, and that's like their big thing to get their crowd going. And the Oregon sideline got really into it. Like they were still down in the game, I think, and they got like way hyped up, and that kind of led them back on their comeback.
That's interesting. Oregon had a pretty complete game, for the most part. I mean, offensively, Dylan Gabriel, he was okay. He was efficient, had an interception, no touchdowns. So this is the first game this year that he hasn't contributed to a touchdown, which is kind of interesting. So maybe there's something that Wisconsin kind of figured out that we might see other teams implement. But their running back, Jordan James, had 121 yards and a touchdown. I mean, that's a pretty solid day.
They were moving the ball early in the game. They settled for 2 field goals there at the beginning, and they also threw a red zone interception. So they kind of stymied themselves a little bit early on. But Wisconsin was able to take the lead, and Oregon was just able to come back in the fourth quarter. They got 10 points to come back and preserve their perfect season as they move forward towards the Big Ten championship game.
Yeah, Oregon living dangerously, there. I was thinking about their schedule this year, or from the season, and they've got 2 decent wins. You got the one over Ohio State at one. I mean, obviously that's a great win, but one that I think people forget about is the win over Boise State. You
Right.
know, that was also a 1-point victory. So I don't think we really know how good Oregon is or isn't at this point.
But they've got Washington left, um, and that's a rivalry game for them. Even if Washington is down, Washington beat them twice last year, kept them out of the playoff last year. So that could be an interesting game. And then obviously they'll most likely be in the Big Ten title game. They'll face the winner of this week's Ohio State Indiana game, and we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, looking forward to that. BYU has been talking about living dangerously. BYU has been living dangerously all year. I mean, literally winning multiple 1-point games or last
Or
possession games.
needing controversial calls to save their tails to kick a game-winning field goal against Utah.
Exactly, exactly. But somehow, Kansas, RKO out of nowhere. They take them down 17-13. Kind of kind of crazy if you really think about it. You know, I know Kansas was originally this year, you know, kind of picked to be a pretty decent team because they've been on the, you know, the come up the past couple of years.
Yeah, they had one.
But
I mean, last year was one of their best seasons in recent memory, and they were looked at as a good competitor for the Big 12 championship cover of the year. But it's been a bad year for them. But then all of a sudden, the last 2 weeks, they beat Iowa State last week. So Iowa State only had one loss coming into that game, and now they knock off undefeated BYU. So Kansas is making some noise, even though their season is kind of spun out of control. But
that's going to make it tough for the Big 12 to have multiple teams in the playoff. So it
right.
looks like we're just going to get one from the Big 12 in that second round bye or first
Yeah,
round bye.
and it looks like that team is probably going to be Colorado. Um, they got another big win on Saturday. They beat Utah 49-24. Travis Hunter, right now with Gabriel's off day and some amazing plays from Travis Hunter in that game, you got to figure he's taking the lead in the Heisman race at this point. But we shall see. BYU still has the inside shot to play Colorado in that Big 12 championship game, but they've got to play Arizona State this week, who also has is sitting at 8-2. So that should be a good matchup. And we'll see. The winner of that game will most likely take on Colorado and will probably be the Big 12's only representative in the playoff.
Speaking of Travis Hunter, uh, he you don't really hear much about him off the field, right? So, you know, saw some stuff over the weekend talking about Travis Hunter, and it really impressed the hell out of me. Uh, Apparently, he's like a straight A student. He doesn't like to go out and party and do all the normal college stuff that us degenerates did. But man, it just really impressed me that, you know, someone at that level, when, you know, we're used to seeing players at that level kind of be divas or,
Yeah.
problems or stuff like that. And he just seems like the best kid and absolutely the most talented kid in college football.
Yeah. I mean, he's from Lawrenceville. He went to Collins Hill. So he's from around here. So I knew a lot about him, you know. He was certainly that talent. He was the number one player in the country coming out of high school for a reason.
Yeah.
He was a long time Florida State fan and really a Dion fan. Um, there was rumors that he was going to flip, and then he ended up following Dion to Jackson State for a year, and then to Colorado. He's been very loyal. I know he's got an online presence. I know he's big in social media and stuff like that. So I know that is one thing that he does. But from all I've seen, yeah, he's an impressive kid. There were some highlights, after the game of him stopping and talking to some fans and stuff, and giving away some of his wristbands and things to a disabled kid. So yeah, he's definitely a good kid, and he'd be a good role model, a good guy to have representing the Heisman. So it'll be an interesting race
Yeah.
down the end. If Gabriel and Oregon closes out an undefeated season, and let's say that Colorado doesn't win that Big 12 championship, then maybe it's Gabriel. But right now, I would give the edge to Travis Hunter.
he's definitely going to be the leader in the clubhouse. He's got, stats from both sides of the ball.
Yep.
He's an amazing athlete.
The first one, I think they had a stat the other day. He's the first guy to hit 3 interceptions and like 40 plus receptions since Champ Bailey did it in 1998. So
it's good company to be in.
it sure is. Champ Bailey finished 3rd or 4th in the Heisman in 1998.
So going back to the Sunshine State, speaking of Deion, Florida took down LSU, and shocking fashion, but it effectively eliminates LSU from title contention.
It not only did it eliminate them from title contention, but I also think it is exposing some of the issues that Brian Kelly has at LSU. He was seen on the sideline yelling at players. There's been rumblings of, fights going on within the program. He's in trouble of losing that fan base. He was an outsider coming from Notre Dame anyway. They kind of joked to him about his fake Cajun accent and everything, but 3 straight losses doesn't look good in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, you think he's about to get that greatest job in the world?
He might.
Fired and getting paid out millions and millions and millions.
It is the best job in the world. Fired football coach. Ask Dan Mullen about that one.
Yeah, sign me up. I can coach a team really poorly for a year.
On the Florida side of the ball, Lagway was back, and he kind of had a good day, but it was kind of similar to that game he had early in the season. I think he was only about 50% completion, but he hit a couple of deep passes. And you know what? With that win, Florida is now 5-5, and they have Florida State at the end of the season, who's a joke at 1-9 or whatever. Florida may turn this thing around and get bowl eligible, which would be very impressive for Billy Napier, where they were already on a backup quarterback and facing a schedule that looked to be, ending up not necessarily being, but looked early on to be the toughest down the stretch you could get. It's a pretty good job for them. So we'll see what happens with them this week as they get to face Ole Miss.
Yeah, quite the turnaround, and good for Billy Napier. They were ready to run him off after his second game against Texas A&M, and he got that team to buy in. That's the mark of a good coach. Are your players willing to give it their all for you? And he was able to get that buy-in, and I think that's going to help Florida in the long run. I hate to say it because I hate Florida, but I think Napier's turnaround and how that team has responded to him is going to go a long way in recruiting.
Right. And they've got a good foundation. They've got a good quarterback to build around. And certainly that team has been different when he's been in the game. I kind of question the reason that Graham Mertz was even starting at the beginning of the year, because since Lagway has been playing, even in the first half of the game against us when he was, helping them move the ball, like it just seems like they are a different team when he's in the game.
Oh, for sure they are. He gives them, the dual threat. He can chunk it downfield, which he's really good at. He's really good with the deep ball, and he can run. I mean, he's a big dude, and
he's a big
fast.
dude. He's very Cam Newton-esque in his physique,
Yeah. Tim Tebow-esque, if you will, since he's in Florida.
Well, where do you think Cam Newton started, man?
Oh, that's true. He did start at Florida. Playoff rankings came out this week on Tuesday, and we didn't see a lot of movement. Oregon still number 1, Ohio State 2, Texas at 3, Penn State 4, Indiana at 5. That's pretty high for them. There's a lot to debate there. And then one that kind of shocks me the most is Notre Dame being there at 6 right now. Right now, keyword.
Right. Yeah, Notre Dame up there at 6 surprises me. Their loss was to Northern Illinois. And if you want to say, oh, it's a bad loss, but they only have one, well, why is it Miami ranked ahead? Their loss was at least to Georgia Tech. I mean, that's got to be a lot. better of a loss than Northern Illinois. And who does Notre Dame have to say that they beat? They beat Texas A&M.
Yeah.
That's it.
And Miami lost on the road too. Notre Dame lost at home to a 5-5 NIU team. I mean,
If that.
yeah. They don't have Michael Turner back there.
No. But Georgia moved up. They moved up 2 spots from number 12 to number 10. So now they would be in the playoff. Tennessee, who was at number 9, fell to number 11. Very interesting that Georgia lost the week before to, a fairly highly ranked Ole Miss team and fell from number 3 to number 12. But Tennessee loses to Georgia, who was ranked 12th, and they fell 2 spots. I don't quite understand what's going on with this committee and what they value. It's becoming abundantly clear that they value the one-loss record a lot, and they don't care about who you beat. They're telling the country that why would you schedule hard games if you only need wins and losses? Why do teams like Georgia go out and schedule Clemson? Why would LSU go out and schedule a game against USC? Like, I just don't like the message they're sending now. In a couple of weeks, that may all be a moot point. This might all just be part of the show. And when they get to the final rankings, they redo it all and actually use all their input. But right now, it just seems dumb.
Yeah, I mean, last year's a good case study for that because the final ranking was much different than the penultimate ranking.
Right.
Proud of myself for using that word.
One other thing I do notice about these rankings, Boise State is now up at 12, where BYU and Colorado are now at 14 and 16, which means technically Boise State would be one of the 4 in line to get a bye. Because it's not the group of 4 automatically doesn't get the bye. It's the 4 highest rated conference champions. So right now, Boise State could have potentially get a first round bye in the playoff. So that's an interesting development if that holds.
That would be wild.
Now, I suspect if Colorado keeps winning and they beat a good BYU or Arizona State team who is now at 21, if it's one of those teams and they get that victory, they will bump up. They should, but you never know. Good wins don't seem to be important. So I guess we'll just have to see what happens in the next couple of weeks.
And you still have SMU hanging around there. So it'll probably be SMU versus Miami in the ACC championship game. And right now, the whole debate is with this playoff system, do you even want to be in that conference championship game?
Right. I mean, that conversation has been going around today. That apparently, I think Lane Kiffin said it, but some other coaches are saying that they don't want to be in the SEC championship game. And if you're Georgia, you absolutely don't. Like, you are a banged up team. You've got UMass and Georgia Tech. You would rather have 3 weeks off and then play a playoff game, potentially at home, but even on the road is better than taking on an SEC team in 2 weeks and potentially missing out on the playoff.
Yeah, it's a huge risk.
Yeah, they've set this up bad, and I think they're going to have to rethink conference championship games in terms of how they make the rankings because teams aren't going to want to play in them. If they could potentially lose their spot in the playoff because they lose in the conference championship game, why would you do that? Like, we saw it happen to Georgia last year. Georgia, was undefeated, hadn't lost a game in 2 years, and then they lose by 3 points to Alabama and they miss the playoff.
Yeah.
That was bad when it was 4 teams. And if you're going to have teams potentially in that same scenario, but in the 12-team playoff, they've got to figure something out.
I'm just glad people are finally catching up to what I've been saying since they announced the 12-team playoff with the whole bracket system that they came up with. As soon as I saw that, I was immediately saying, man, if you play in the conference championship, you're kind of at a disadvantage there. The only teams that will really benefit from playing in that conference championship game are the teams that have no shot to get in the playoff, but somehow end up number 2 in their conference. It's like NCAA basketball.
Right.
Remember, Georgia is the poster child of this, of being the worst team in the history of basketball, somehow winning the SEC championship and making the
Yeah.
tournament. No business being there whatsoever. So, yeah. So
Well,
glad to hear that other people are finally catching on. Hopefully we get through next year and they come up with something that makes more sense logically. If it's going to be earn it on the field type thing, then make the conference championship actually mean something as far as getting into the playoff,
yeah.
as opposed to just, oh, we're picking, who we think are the best teams, which has always been the problem with college football. Also, the great thing about college football, but the biggest problem that they've been trying to solve with the whole playoff system.
Yeah, I think the only way they're going to ultimately get away with it is with automatic bids for not just the conference champions, but perhaps it becomes if you qualify for your conference championship game, you're automatically in. Now, seedings can change based on you winning and losing the conference title game, but that just might be a reward you get for making your conference championship game. But I only see that happening when they expand. If they go to 16, they won't do it at 12.
Right. Yeah, and it's only going to get bigger. Does it go beyond 16? That's the question.
I'm sure it could. But at what point are you really starting to devalue games even more than you already have? I don't know. I say that, but you know what drives it all? It's money, man. So if they can make that money, they're going to do it.
Cash Jones, baby. So that leads us into next week, week 13. We're going to talk about some of the biggest games that are coming up. We'll start out with Indiana, Ohio State, the game of the weekend. It's the one everybody wants to see. It's going to tell us if Indiana's for real or they are just the beneficiaries of a really easy schedule, but still, with a good team.
Right. I think Ohio State is going to beat the crap out of them. That's how I see it's going. I know Indiana's a nice story. I know people are on that Indiana train. The coach is charismatic. They've been winning big, but they have played nobody. Their schedule is one of the weakest of a Power 5 team or Power 4 team in the country. And they're going to play an Ohio State team that is uber talented, playing well. And to me, this game, if Ohio State comes out there and absolutely waxes Indiana, personally, I think Indiana should be out of the playoffs. A lot of people aren't going to like that. There's a lot of national writers that really, really like Indiana, and I even heard some saying Indiana should be ranked number 1. I don't get it. I don't see it.
That's ridiculous. This reminds me of college basketball a lot. With the big tournament, you get the Cinderella story. And I've heard this argument from different talking heads like Cowherd and other guys like that, but it holds true. The Cinderella story is great for the first few rounds, but at the end of the day, you want to see the best teams, the big teams play each other, the blue bloods, go at it and knock each other out. If Indiana is legit and they beat Ohio State, then absolutely they should be in the top 5. No doubt they will get their chance against Oregon, and they would be a playoff team either way. I think if they beat Ohio State, they're a playoff team no matter what.
If they beat Ohio State, they absolutely should be a playoff team. Then
Yeah.
that to me that takes out the doubt. Even if they beat Ohio State and they went and played Oregon and they got stomped by Oregon, they should still be in the playoff at that point. But you've got to beat somebody. This is the only team with a pulse on your schedule. You got to win this one. If you don't, you're out. That's my opinion. I don't think that will happen, but it should.
Yeah, I'm thinking Ohio State's gonna roll pretty easily in this game. Once it gets later in the game, I think in the beginning, it'll be tight because teams come out fired up, full of energy. But the really, really good teams like Ohio State, they have that depth, and they have literally the most talented roster in America that they paid for. So
Right.
kudos to them for that. And I'm excited for this game. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm going to be glued to it.
So we got probably the second biggest game, at least in terms of potential playoff implications for the weekend, is Army at 9-0 going to take on Notre Dame at 9-1. For so many reasons, this game fascinates me. I've talked up Army all season long. Just absolutely a great story. The Army, getting to this point in the season undefeated is just amazing because of the restrictions that they have as a military academy, player sizes and things like that, and the demands of being a student at West Point. It's amazing that they're 9-0. And for Notre Dame, now I've talked about Notre Dame's bad loss. If they lost to Army, it would not be a bad loss. This Army team is solid. But for Notre Dame, this has now become a resume builder. They need a big win if they're going to solidify their justification at number 6 in the playoff ranking.
Yeah, it's a must win for Notre Dame. I think they'll do it. They're clicking on all cylinders right now. They've really turned it around since that Northern Illinois game. But it would be a great story to see Army win, taking us back to the 1920s and 30s when Army was winning all the national championships.
Right. Either way, Army
Yeah.
is going to play in their conference championship game. It looks like they're going to play Tulane, who is playing some really good football right now. So they're going to have a challenge when they get to that conference championship game as well.
So a tricky game that we're looking forward to, Ole Miss at Florida. This is going to be an interesting matchup. Ole Miss coming off a bye after a big win against Georgia. We've seen how that has been kind of a negative or ill preparing or whatever it is. I don't know why, but coming off a big win and having a bye week, you think, oh, we get a bye week, get some rest, can really prepare. But we've seen it several times this year where team has a big win, they go to the bye week, and then they don't play very well coming off the bye. So this is a trap. This is a trap game. This is like pure, total trap game for Ole Miss.
It's an absolutely trap game. Ole Miss has been up and down at times this year. They lost to Kentucky. They just came out flat. Florida, as we mentioned earlier tonight, is playing with a lot of confidence and playing at home. They're playing, they've got Florida State next week, but if they can win this game, they can finish 7-5, and that's not just making a bowl game. That's getting to a decent bowl game. So Florida's got a lot to play for. Ole Miss has got to be careful. They've, right now they'd be in the playoff, but if they're looking ahead to the playoffs, Florida will bite them.
Yeah, they will. They will. All Florida needs is a couple deep shots from Lagway, and they get that running game going like they did this past week. They're going to be in this game. I wouldn't be shocked if it's close.
Yep. Last game we were going to mention is we talked a little bit about before, BYU going to take on Arizona State. This one is going to probably decide a spot in the Big 12 championship game. Most likely to take on Colorado if Colorado keeps winning. So, Burl, any quick thoughts? I personally, after watching BYU the last few weeks, Arizona State's a good football team. I've seen a little bit of them. They're a good football team. So, my bet Arizona State wins this game and moves on to face Colorado.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. BYU, now the most untrustworthy top team. Taking it from Miami. After that loss against Kansas, that was a pretty bad loss for anybody at this point in the year. And like you said, Arizona State's playing well. I mean, 8-2. It's a good record, and it wouldn't shock me one bit to see Arizona State take out BYU and make it into the Big 12 championship game.
Yep. So another big week coming up. Once again, thanks everybody for joining the show tonight. If you can take a minute, please subscribe, leave a comment below. Tell us who you think's going to win this week. Once again, if you enjoyed the show, leave us a like, and we will talk to you again next week. Thanks for watching.
See ya.